Hey folks, this is Mandeep, and this morning I did a session for people in my Discord room on how to approach stocks for day trading. And a number of you missed the session, so I'm recording this, and I promise to do this periodically in the morning, so we can collectively look at which stocks are moving and what approach you want to take for selecting these stocks, right? So the first thing I mentioned this morning was that you always should start off with the sector performance list, right? And this sector performance list is part of what I provide everybody who has the trading system, the ultimate trading strategy, but that's really not the focus of the discussion today. So this list essentially is telling you which stocks are moving. Now, if you actually move to the bottom, it's telling me that chemicals and banks and technology and some of the TLTs and the software sector is really not in vogue today, right? So I would avoid, my preference would be to avoid all of these sectors because these are performing negatively, or I would focus on shorting these stocks, right? But if you move to the top of the list, then you see things like Nugget, you see retail sector, you see IWM, and you see the small cap biotech index, you see metals, you see home builders, you see the healthcare sector, railroads, and some of these sectors which are really outperforming everything else, right? As you all know, there's a sector rotation that happens continuously in the market, and if you're trading from a shorter term perspective, you want to focus on this list because stocks that are part of this list are likely going to succeed versus stocks that are not part of this list, and that's pretty obvious. So now let's take a look at the 5-minute list, right? So I was looking at a 5-minute list, and what I want to focus is on these three columns today. And when you have a large number of stocks, right, how do you end up figuring out which is the stocks that offer you the best probability of trade, right? So the first thing is the first column is the dynamic orb. So essentially, a lot of people trade the 15-minute orb or the 30-minute orb. So in other words, the opening range breakout of the first 15 minutes, the high and the low of the first 15 minutes, and if the stock takes out that range, then that's what you would get into. So there's an example where it's trading between the 15-minute opening range, and then it takes the low part out, right? And so this becomes sort of a natural stock to short, as an example where you would go long, right? So what this is doing is it starts off at say 9:35 Eastern Standard Time, and it'll look at for the first 10 minutes from 9:35 to 9:45, it'll look at stocks that are breaking the 5-minute orb. Now at 9:45, it's going to reset and then start to look at stocks that are breaking the 15-minute orb. And then at 10 o'clock, it resets again to start looking for stocks that are breaking the first 30-minute orb. So you want to focus on stocks where the number is 1. In other words, it's breaking the 5-minute, then it's breaking the 15, and breaking the 30. So clearly, once it's breaking 30, it's obviously broken the lower time frames, right? And finally, at 10:30 and onwards, it'll only display 1 for those stocks that have taken out the hourly opening range breakout. The next thing is the relative volume, and this relative volume is really hard to compute, and you have to subscribe to some service to get this data. But I've been able to figure out kind of a unique way of measuring the relative volume inside the TOS code, right? So what we are looking at is clearly now it's displaying end of the day data, but even during the first 5-10 minutes, you will start seeing when this gets color coded green, it means it has high relative volume, which implies a high level of institutional interest in these stocks. And finally, this is the ATR. The ATR is the average true range, which is the high and low, and it takes the average of the last 14 days and computes an average true range. So if a stock has an ATR of 2, that means on an average it'll move 2 points between the high and the low. But in general, it'll never, since this is an average on a typical day, it'll move 1 standard deviation, which is approximately 68% move in either the long or the short side, right? So all of these are dynamically getting adjusted. So once you have them as part of the code, then it you can apply it on any watch list of interest. And the way I use it is very simple. So I'm essentially looking for things that are green across the board. So 1, it is breaking the orb. 2, it's got high relative volume, and it's also exceeding its ATR for that time of the day. So really my goal is to find stocks that are going to hit their full ATR, right? So let's say the stock has hit 20% of its ATR, then I know there's 80% left. And since it's moving much faster than average, the likelihood of hitting its entire ATR is much higher versus the standard 68%. And one of the things I looked at from the sector performance list was which sectors were moving. So the healthcare sector was definitely performing or outperforming the other sectors. So clearly the next thing is to look at the list and see which are the healthcare stocks in this. Clearly we had Humana, right? So this is a large list today, so you've quite a few stocks. Now what I typically do is I tend to ignore everything that's kind of like a mixed bag, right? So and focus on stocks that are just sort of green across the board. So high dynamic opening range breakout, high volume, high ATR. So let's take a look at Humana. This is green across the board. And also on our system, it actually triggered a buy, right, which is the ultimate trading system. And if you right click and show the report, it give you this is standard. I'm using 300 stocks, but you can use whatever number of stocks for computing purposes. So it did like close to 2,000 in profit. Let's take a look at another stock from the same sector, which is WCG, which is the WellCare Health Plan, right? Again, it's above the opening range breakout, had a buy signal, and just clicking on it tells you you're at 937. So if you just took two stocks, it's roughly like about $3,000 in profit, right? Now, I'm not saying that you're going to make that kind of money every day, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to put the probability in your favor. Now this is a long-term list, and again we'll focus on stocks that are again green across the board. Ignore everything else. Now given that we have a total of 5,000-6,000 stocks, now your focus is essentially boiled down to 3 or 4 stocks during the day, right? So let's take a look at TPX, so green across the board, and again, if you right click on this and hit show report here, in my case, you see a profit of 171 on 300 shares on this one, and this just gives you sort of a way of approaching this. ABC is another good example, 1, 1 and 262. So this one didn't move too much, but at least not a place where you would lose money. Clearly, you made $60, which may be insignificant for some, but significant for many people, right? At least during the day. But if you add all of these together, then you're doing well in general. So by just looking at these three dynamic, by looking at these 3 columns, it's helping you focus on which stocks to take during the morning and which are the ones that are putting the probability in your favor. So that's all for today. One of the things that I want to focus on next time is how do we look at the market watch and look at creating alerts on stocks, right? So simple alerts are fairly straightforward, right, on price and so on and so forth. But we can also create alerts on studies, right? So if you have a simple study, you can apply it to a particular stock, right? And for those of you in my room that are interested, one of the things I've done is I've made all of these available on the website. I didn't have it prior to today, but since some of you asked, I put them on the website as well. Have a great evening, and we'll continue this session again this